I didn't think I was going to make it. I didn't think I was going to make it at all. When I made the decision to stand up and run, everybody was dead.
Aden, 1967. 22 British soldiers are killed on one day in June, betrayed by Arabs they'd regarded as allies. These killings were a trigger for revenge by a group of soldiers led by Lieutenant Colonel Colin Mitchell.
We're a very mean lot. I mean, we'll be very fair, you know. But if anyone starts any trouble, they'll just get their head blown off.
Mitchell and his men became a law unto themselves. But his controversial actions in Aden would place him on a collision course with the British establishment and raise questions about the brutality of his soldiers during the final phase of empire.
The White Paper on the Defence Review announces some momentous decisions. In the Middle East, we are pulling out of Aden in 2 years' time.
1966. The Labour government pledged to leave one of its last empire posts, the port of Aden, now part of Yemen, on the edge of the Arabian Peninsula.
We were finding it more and more difficult with the pressures on our economy internally to maintain forces overseas. By the time we left, British forces everywhere were an irritating factor, a provocative factor, and not a stabilising one.
Crater City was the oldest district in this Yemeni port and its Arab heartland. Who controlled Crater controlled Aden. A British regiment, the Royal Northumberland Fusiliers, was maintaining British rule.
Basically, the crater, which is in Aden, it's an extinct volcano. It's about 2,000 feet high, some of the peaks. Everywhere you look, you see, you can't get away from the crater wall, can't get away from the fact that it is inside a volcano. Everywhere you look, you see that sheer wall going straight up.
It's only mad dogs and Englishmen, we understand, go out in the midday heat. Well, we were out there in the midday heat 7 days of the week. We felt was disconnected from the rest of Aden itself in many ways. Perhaps geographically and then psychologically, because you were enclosed in it. There was one way in and another way out.
Crater was a violent place. The announcement that the British were to leave had only provoked more tension. The Arabs wanted to be seen to drive the British out. The British troops wanted to stop them, and didn't care who saw.
They were gollies or blackies or whatever. And yes, we had an internal security program which we worked to, and that would actually have golly hunt on it. We were so tuned in and so keyed up to get results that I think that we took everybody as being a potential terrorist. And golly was a name that we used, and golly was a name that just about everybody else in the regiment was familiar with.
I was dumbfounded the first time I saw some of our lads in action, Northumberland Fusiliers. I thought, if we're really about trying to withdraw from Aden peacefully, if we really want to win hearts and minds, this doesn't seem to be the way to be doing it.
We had people who, in some cases, it would be genuine, they lost control, lost discipline, and just let loose in sheer fear of their lives. There were others who sought to gain glory by shooting innocent people. That did happen. It was one of those things. It did happen.
I remember we were the first crew to film British soldiers actually smashing the heads of some of the local natives with rifle butts and kicking them. Now that was not a done thing. Up to that time, basically, journalism shied away from that. You didn't shine the light on the bad behaviour of your boys.
For the first time, television was bringing a war involving British soldiers into the living room and capturing the end of empire on film.
Are we running?
So get out of it!
This could be one of the biggest battles yet. The British troops are now going in to try and knock out the Flossie regular machine gun posts. That's far from great time.
On my first assignment to Aden, I had experience of Africa and Macmillan's Winds of Change, seeing how it was bringing an end to empire in Africa. And certainly by the time I got to Aden, it was writ large, you could smell it even, that the clock was ticking. From the moment I stepped off the plane, one was always in a shooting war.
This is probably the biggest single battle that British troops have been involved in with terrorists so far in Aden. We don't know what's going on. British troops are over in that direction, and the Russian... Flossie commandos are down in that direction, and we're right in the middle.
The British presence was under attack from two rival groups: the National Liberation Front, the NLF, and the Front for the Liberation of South Yemen, Flossie, backed by Egypt's President Nasser. He was spreading a new ideology, combining Arab nationalism with an increasingly Marxist doctrine.
It wasn't only about ending colonialism, it was also about what to do after independence. Armed struggle was only a way to reach independence.
The British wanted to impose a successor. They planned to hand power to a federation they'd helped establish. They'd set up an Arab army to defend the federation.
This is the headquarters of the Arab army, which will take over when we go. It's been raised and trained by British officers. These Arabs view our departure with dismay.
As summer approached, it wasn't clear if the federation would last once British support was removed.
The revolutionaries and the NLF were determined to force out the British without negotiations and stop them from handing power to British agents or a puppet government.
All British, even civilians, were targets for the nationalist guerrillas. Britain banned the NLF. It was policy to arrest and imprison its members. Allegations of British torture of Arab prisoners caused international condemnation.
They treated the nationalist fighters badly, and many died and many others were mutilated. Nevertheless, we tried to inflict as much harm as we could on the British.
Soldiers like Brian Roy would sometimes act as guards in the prison.
We would just see them being taken out to be interrogated, to come back again. Yeah, sometimes they would look a bit different. Physically, they would be... they'd been through the mill.
The Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders would be the last soldiers in Crater before British withdrawal. They claimed to have more combat experience than any other regiment.
Why I joined the Argylls? That was simple. In my youth, I was a bad boy. And I was more or less told, if you don't straighten out, you're going to be a crook and you'll end up in prison. So the only place I could go was into the army. The local regiment, the Argylls.
Colin Mitchell was the commanding officer, Colonel Colin Mitchell. Fine man, what you would call a soldier's soldier. He would never ask you to do anything that he couldn't do himself. He was hands-on all the time, every way, from the bottom rank to the top rank. They all loved Colonel Colin.
There aren't very many good causes worth dying for. Your regiment happens to be one of them, you know. We're a very narrow little world, tiny sort of, society of our own. And we're a very, very much a sort of family regiment, the Argylls, you know. You want chaps who are absolutely first-class fighting animals.
He was brilliant. He was incisive. You immediately knew when he was there that life was going to be different. Sometimes it wasn't all that comfortable, and we were probably the best battalion in the British Army by a long chalk, and we were Highlanders anyway, so they're bound to be good.
Before we went out, Colonel Mitchell made sure that every man was trained up to work in the heat. And the way he done that was he put all the heating on in the gymnasium up full blast and made us train in full combat suits, wearing everything so as we could sweat and get used to the heat. And he was right, it was hot.
Back in Aden, the Northumberland Fusiliers were preparing to leave Crater. Anne Moncur was looking forward to seeing her husband, Company Commander John Moncur.
I started to get in extra food. I bought some champagne because they were coming home. Really, it was general preparation and a tremendous build-up of excitement and anticipation. Almost feeling sick, you know, with anticipation and excitement. Yeah.
Colonel Mitchell arrived in Aden with an advance party of Argylls. They were shadowing the Northumberland Fusiliers before they'd officially take control of Crater at the end of June. It was one of many Empire postings for Mitchell, but his first in charge of the regiment. At 41, he was on the military fast track.
Behave yourself and nothing happens to you. If you start playing terrorism, you're dead.
I think the secret to understanding Colonel Mitchell is that he was truly a man out of his time. He was a man who would have preferred empire to remain. He was an empire creator, but here he was being asked to be an empire dismantler. And I don't think psychologically that he was attuned to that.
20th of June, Crater. The events of the next few hours would entrench Mitchell's view that British policy in Aden was weak. The NLF had infiltrated the Federation's military and incited an uprising in the armed police barracks.
I worked for the British, but I was also a member of the National Liberation Front. I was motivated by patriotism. We were all ready and prepared in the camp, and when we received the call through loudspeakers, we took our guns and went outside and followed orders.
I guess that was their moment, that they could get revenge back on us and do back to us what we did to them. And that's the price that we paid.
A British patrol radioed that Arab police were acting suspiciously. When that patrol failed to respond to calls to leave Crater, Middle East Command feared the worst. John Moncur went into Crater accompanied by some Argylls. John Story was one of the Northumberland Fusiliers on the 2 Land Rovers.
It was a different day for me because it was my day off. I was a bit bored. I was leaning on the balcony. One of the Land Rovers pulled up and some of the guys jumped in. They said, "Do I want to come along?" I said, "I'd love to." We must have been doing 50 miles an hour. And as we approached the barracks, the machine guns up. There must have been 200 or 300 people shooting. From the walls of the barracks, it was from the flats on the opposite side. One of the Land Rovers swerved and hit the wall. Ours came to a stop, it went on fire. We all jumped out.
There were 2 British vehicles outside and they were destroyed, and all those in the vehicles were killed. The vehicles were attacked from all directions. They were shooting from everywhere.
I didn't think I was going to make it. I didn't think I was going to make it at all. So much adrenaline going through you that all your senses become hyper sharpened. You look at him, he's being shot, he's run down the road on fire. You look around, I must have seen a doorway, probably didn't register, and it just, I thought, I have to move, I've got to get out of this situation, I've got to get away from where I am at the time. When I made the decision to stand up and run, everybody was dead.
Martin Ford was instructed to fly over Crater to report what had happened.
As we flew over the edge of the crater, I saw that the town was now absolutely empty. Every road was blocked off by vehicles. And as I flew over, I could see that there were 2 Land Rovers there, on fire, bodies lying all round, and lots of shooting. So I circled round